Hey, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In our previous videos, we have discussed about a break in for loop and break in while loop. In this video, we will see break in nested loops. So first, we will go through the syntax. So later, we will be going through some examples so that we can able to understand clearly how this break works in nested loops. So first of all, going through the syntax, we will be using nested for loops to understand this break in nested loops. So for that reason, we generally use an iterable in for loop, right? So for that reason, we will be having a element to iterate through the iterable. So for that reason, we will be having element in iterable which is outer. So I am mentioning outer. So after that, we will be having another loop which is inner for loop, right? So for that reason, we will be having another element is I will be taking inner element iterable is inner, right? So for that reason only I am mentioning like this. So in this for loop, we are in inner for loop, right? We can use a break. So for that reason, I am mentioning a condition which is the break condition. So I will mention inner break condition, right? So by using this condition, we can break this particular inner for loop. So for that reason, I am mentioning a break here. So we are in this inner for loop. In this inner for loop, we are having an statement in order to execute particular break. So now this break will be. So what about this outer for loop here? So we can also have a break statement for the outer for loop. We can mention a break statement outer break condition, right? So I'm mentioning the outer break condition here. In this also, we can have this break condition for the outer for loop. We can mention this particular outer for loop break condition at the end, at the middle, at the beginning also. So let us go ahead and see with an example so that we can able to understand this syntax more clearly so that you can able to use this break effectively in the nested loops. So for that reason, what I will be taking here is that here you can see we are finding elements in the nested list. So not finding elements, stopping the elements whenever we find any other element. So for that reason, I will use. So I will take the nested list itself, the variable name nested list. So in this nested list, what I will be having is here this is one list, right? So in this list, I will be having another list. I will take the numbers 1, 2, 3 here. So after that, I will take another list. I will start with 2, 3, 4. After that, I will take another list. I will start with 3, 4, 5. So I will take one more list so that we can able to understand more clearly. That is the reason I am taking this rough list. So here I will start with 4, 5, and 6. So now we have this many numbers and this many number of lists inside of this list, right? So for that reason, we are mentioning all these things in order to understand nested loops. For that reason only, I am mentioning this many numbers. So for I will be using for loop for element. So I will start with this particular list, right? So this list is to iterate through this particular nested list. So that is what I am mentioning. So for list nested list here. So we need to iterate through this particular nested list, right? So for that reason only, I am mentioning here we need to mention nested, right? So if I mention nested list, so if I directly print this particular list, what we will be getting is that we can able to get this particular lists. So we are only getting the list, right? Because these lists are present inside of this list. So when we iterate through this particular nested list, we only get the list that are present in here. So if you wanted to iterate through this list, if you wanted to get the integer numbers individually, so what we need to do, we need to again iterate through this particular list that we are having here, right? So for that reason, we need to use again one more for loop to iterate though in those. So for that reason only I am using one more iterable and I will use particular element in list here. So now if I print the element here, element, so now if I execute this, we can able to see we are getting the elements individually like this one or like that we are having. If I comment this so that we can able to understand more clearly so that we can see 1, 2, 3, 2, 5. Like that, we are having all these particular elements that we are having here. So now what we need to do is that in order to understand this break, I will mention this particular break inside of this particular for loop, which is in the inner for loop. So for that reason, I am mentioning a condition. The condition is that if this particular element here, right, this particular element is responsible for the iterating through these many alphabets, right? So for that reason, if this particular element reaches to the value 3, if this particular element is equal to 3, what I need to do? I need to break. So now if I execute this, we can able to see the result. We are getting 1, 2 here, and we are not getting 3. So here we are printing 3. We are having this print statement here, right? So for that reason, we are printing this particular value, and after printing that, we are having this. So to make you more understanding, so I will print one more statement here. So I will mention break occurring at, I will mention the number here. So the element that we wanted to print. So now if I execute, we are initially having this particular 1, 2, 3. After printing this particular 1, 2, 3, here you can observe in the fifth line, we are printing first the value. So later we have this particular break statement. So for that reason, we are having this particular 3 before also. So now you can see for the first list here, I will mention this particular thing also, that we can able to understand more clearly. So here we have this particular first list. So in this first list, we are printing 1, 2, 3. After we reach to this statement, what we are having this break statement. So for that reason, we are printing this particular break is occurring at 3, so that we are coming out of the loop. So after that, we are having this particular 2, 3, 4. Here you can observe we are printing only 2 and 3, and we are not printing 4, because before this particular 4 we are having this particular break. So for that reason, we are coming out of the loop. So we are printing only 2. So after that, you can observe more clearly, understand more clearly. Here we are having 3, 4, 5 in this list, right? Here we have 3, 4, 5. You can see the list here. We are having 3, 4, 5. Here, as we have mentioned, if element as 3, as and when we reach to the 3 element, we are not printing 4, 5. You cannot able to see 4, 5 here. The reason is because as and when we reach to this particular 3, we are printing. We are coming out of the loop by this particular break statement here. So now I hope you can able to understand this logic. So if I put this particular print statement here, and if I put at the end of this here, so now we can able to understand in a different. So now if I execute this, you cannot see this particular 3 value before, right? So in the previous example, in the previous execution, we can see 1, 2, 3. So now we are only able to 1, 2, because we are having this print at the end, right? So after this particular break, so for that reason, we cannot able to see this particular print after this particular thing, right? So for that reason, we are not able to see anywhere in this particular single integer values, right? So I hope you can able to understand. After that, we are encountering this particular break is occurring at 3. So now I hope you can able to understand how this break works in the nested loops. We are using only in the nested loops. So we wanted to understand more clearly. So we have only used this break, the inner for loop. We need to understand how this break works in the outer loop also, so that we can able to effectively understand. So for that reason, I am mentioning one more statement here. If element equal to the same example, I will take 3. Here I am mentioning 3, right? So I am taking the same thing, and I will just copy this. So I will copy this here and I will paste here. So now if the element reaches to 3, we need to print this particular break is occurring at element, and we need to print this particular thing. So one thing we need to observe, that here we don't have element, right? So we have only list. So for that reason, we need to mention list here, because this element is only responsible, only occur in this inner for loop. We are in the outer for loop, so we cannot access this list, this element. So for that reason, I am mentioning list. That is what we are iterating here, right? So for that reason, I am mentioning list, and here also I am mentioning list underscore. So now if I execute this, we won't get the exact pattern. We won't get this, because we are there inside of this particular outer loop. So what we need to do is that here we have some indentation problem here. I will fix that. So we don't get anything new here. The reason is because we don't have any three values here, right? So if we have three values, this break will be encountered so that you can able to understand, right? So I hope you can able to understand. So now for that reason, we need to mention the integer value, which is 3 in this outer list. So for that reason, I will mention 3 here. So now you can see 3 here after this particular one list. So now if I execute this, we will get an error. We will fix it. So you can able to see we are getting a type error because this integer object is not iterable. So we are iterating through this list. Right? So this list is considered as a list. So for that reason, we can iterate through this. So we have occurred 3. So 3 is not integer. For that reason, it was still. So for that reason, what I need to do is that I need to mention a condition if the type of this particular list that what we are having is equal to list, then only this all these things we are having this inner loop, right? So that needs to be executed. Else we are executing this particular, right? So for that reason, I am mentioning. So if you got any confusion, so I will suggest you to watch the video once again carefully so that you can able to understand this very important the break in the nested loop. So now if I execute this, we don't see any that particular error. So you can observe we are breaking this particular thing. So previously we have get lot of things, right? So now we are getting only this particular thing here. So now what I will print one more print statement here so that we can able to understand. So I am printing the list. I will print the list. So I will print underscore so that you can able to see the 3 also. So now if I execute this, we are occurring till this 3. So you can see this 3 is here, and after that we are breaking this particular break is occurring at 3. So the break is this. So now why we are not able to go till this particular loop is because we are not going values, right? So why? Because we are having this all this break statement in the outer for loop. As we are executing this in the outer for loop, we don't go to the inner for loop because it was breaking in the outer for loop itself. So as we are breaking the whole thing in the outer for loop, we don't get an opportunity to go to the inner for loop and go and check the remaining lists that we are having. So I hope you can able to understand what I am trying to explain here. I will quickly explain one more time so that you can understand. Concentrate here a little. Here we are having the list, and we this list we are having inner list, and apart from inner list we are having one element which is 3 here. So as we have 3, as we have list, both are different, right? So for that reason, in order to execute one thing, in order to go through this list, I am using and I am checking the type. If it is list, we are using one more for loop. So in this for loop, we are iterating through this individual lists inside of this whole list. So in this list, we are having this element. We are checking if the element inside of this inner list is equal to 3. We are breaking and coming out of the loop. So that is only responsible for this inner loop. So if it is coming out, so if we again check this particular outer loop and we again come to this inner for loop, again go to outer loop, again come to inner loop. This will continuously repeat. But whereas here, we are having this break in the outer loop itself. As we are having the break in the outer loop, as and when this outer loop break is executed, we won't get an opportunity to go inner loop because this outer loop itself is going to be failed. So now I hope you can able to understand. So still if you found any difficulty, I sincerely suggest you to pause the video once again carefully so that you can able to understand, because this was very important break in the nested list. So now I hope you can able to understand. If you found this video interesting, the like button. The next video we will see else to this break. So we can see this particular break is happening, right? So for some case, let's say if I give some other value, let's say I will give 7, that is not present in this list, right? So for that reason, I am giving 7. If I execute this, we cannot see anything, right? We cannot see any break statements happening here. So how to know that we are coming out of the loop using break statement or using normal execution that we can see using else, that we will see in the next video. So thank you for watching this. See you in the next one.